All right. So today is November 14th. This is our last week of live classes before Thanksgiving week. We're not going to have live classes next week because Thanksgiving week gets crazy. I don't know what families' plans are. I know I'll be busy from Wednesday through Friday. So we're just going to take off next week to enjoy the holiday. And then after that, we've got 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas break. We'll have classes until December 15th, and then we'll be off for Christmas break. So may sound crazy to hear me talking about Christmas break, but it's coming quickly. So we'll have classes all this week, no classes next week, and then classes will pick up again the week after Thanksgiving. Okay. This is our Aesop's Fables meeting. We're going to talk about 2 fables. They're number 108 and 109 in our Aesop's Fables class or course online. So my recommendation for you all is to pay attention as we go through this lesson. We'll read these fables together. We'll talk about them. I'll basically answer all of the assignment questions for you and with your help. And then what I recommend you do after we have our class is go to the Aesop's Fables course and complete these assignments and get them turned in while you've got all the answers in your head, okay? So I think this is the easiest way to get Aesop's Fables done. But make sure you're doing the assignments because that gets you credit for this work. These live meetings aren't intended to replace the online courses. They're meant to help you to make better progress in those courses, okay? But at the same time, the time you spend in these live classes, if your parents are keeping track of attendance and things like that, it counts as what's called an hour of instruction time, which is good for your record. So make sure in some way that your parents, jot these things down or keep track of them for the sake of attendance. All right, because it's not just sitting in your house studying. It's having some instruction come from an outside source, which is good for your homeschool record. So make sure that gets recorded somewhere. All right. So like I said, Aesop's Fables number 108 and 109. Before I get started, just give me a quick wave to let me know that you can hear me okay. Everybody hear me okay? All right, good. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. 2 fables today. I'm going to share my screen here with you so you can read with me. Just a second. So our first fable, this is fable number 108. Number 108, I see Sisman's raising hands, which probably means that there's a Sisman trapped outside the meeting room. Let me check. I'll let them in. Actually, a couple kids trapped outside. All right, so we're going to get started here. Fable number 108, the hawk and the farmer. Okay, the hawk and the farmer. So pay attention, listen carefully as we read through it. I'm going to ask you some questions as we go. Which you can I'm not going to ask any questions today because the chat was going a little crazy, but we'll go through this together. And then when I get done, I'll open the chat up for a few minutes, take some questions. You can ask anything you need, and then we'll get to the second fable. The second fable is actually a long one, so I'll try to get through this one quickly so we have some more time for the second fable. All right, the hawk and the farmer. If you've got a piece of paper or something like that, it might be good to just jot down some notes, like I said, so you can complete these assignments after our class is over. So the hawk and the farmer. A hawk pursuing a pigeon with great eagerness. A hawk pursuing a pigeon with great eagerness. Make sure you know what these different animals are that are referred to in the fables. If you don't know what they are, if you don't know anything about them, it's good to take some time and look them up. Either in an encyclopedia or online if your parents can keep an eye on you. A hawk, we live down in the South, out in the country. Hawks are very common. We see them, they're outside every day, big red hawks. Hawks are predators. They're like, imagine an eagle, but much smaller than an eagle. They're still pretty big when you see them, much bigger than a regular bird, but they're predators. So they fly way high up in the sky. And they swoop down and they eat mice out of the fields. Sometimes they'll get other birds. If you keep chickens or something like that, the hawks might bother your chickens. So you gotta watch out for hawks. So hawks are predators, and then pigeons. Most of you probably know what pigeons are. They're pretty common birds. You see them in cities and suburbs. So pigeons are just ordinary city birds. Okay, but then hawks are hunting birds. They're predators. So a hawk was pursuing a pigeon with great eagerness and was caught in a net which had been set in a cornfield for the crows. So the farmer set a net in a cornfield to try to catch crows. I'm not taking any questions, Anna, so put your digital hand down for now. So the farmer had set a net to keep the crows out of his cornfield, but this hawk is chasing a pigeon, and the hawk gets caught in this crow net that the farmer had set. The farmer, seeing the hawk fluttering in the net, came and took him. So this hawk gets stuck in the net. Farmer comes and takes the hawk out of the net. The hawk besought the man to let him go, saying piteously that he had done him no harm. So imagine the hawk being caught, in this Aesop's Fables world where all the animals talk to each other and talk to people. It's all imaginative, right? The hawk begs the farmer to let him go, saying that he did him no wrong. But then the farmer responds to the hawk and says, "Tell me," that's what pray means. Pray means, I ask you. "Pray, what harm had the poor pigeon you followed done to you?" And without more ado, he wrung off the hawk's head. So a pretty gruesome ending to this fable, the hawk and the farmer. The hawk chasing the pigeon gets caught in the farmer's net for the crows. Farmer comes out, gets the hawk. The hawk pleads with him to have mercy on him, saying that, he never did him any harm. And then the farmer says, "Well, what harm had the pigeon done to you?" And then he wrings off his head. And just so you know, the idea of wringing off an animal's head, a bird's head, is pretty common. It's not something crazy, or it's not some like barbaric cruelty. It's just one way that birds are commonly killed on farms. Even chickens, sometimes they're just killed by wringing their neck. So it's not something worth noticing. The point here is the hawk was chasing a pigeon. The hawk gets caught himself, and then the hawk pleads for mercy because he had never done anything wrong to the farmer. And the farmer judges the hawk based on his own treatment of the pigeon. So it's a good example of the golden rule. And I would argue that it's a good lesson about how God is actually going to judge us. Jesus warns us about this in the gospel. He says, "By whatever measure you measure towards others, the same will be measured to you," or by whatever means you judge others. God will basically record the words that you say to other people, as it were, and replay them on Judgment Day for you to hear, so that the way that you judged other people, God will let your own words judge you. And that's why we're warned to be merciful. If we want God to judge us mercifully, then we need to judge others mercifully while we live. So that's really the moral of this fable. It's that you can't plead for mercy when you yourself are not merciful. You could think of what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew. He says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." Right? That's the idea in the Beatitudes. And then in the Lord's Prayer, think about what Jesus teaches us in the Lord's Prayer. We pray, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us," right? So we're asking God to treat us the way that we treat others. So this fable here, the hawk and the farmer, teaches that moral lesson. All right. So why does Aesop choose these characters? Well, he chooses a hawk because it's a predator, very powerful, very fast, very dangerous, and a pigeon because a pigeon is probably the most pathetic of all birds. It's just sort of this weak bird of prey that gets picked on by everybody. The farmer, compared to the hawk, is very powerful. Relative to the hawk, can easily kill and destroy a hawk. And so we've got these two relationships, the relationship between the hawk and the pigeon, and the relationship between the man and the hawk, and it shows us that we ought to do to others what we would like others to do to us. And think about the golden rule: do to others as you would have them do to you. You know, sometimes that can be ridiculous, right? Like, I can think to myself, you know, I would really like it if someone poured a cup of water over my head. Therefore, I should go pour water on other people's heads. You know, that's not what the golden rule means, right? It's saying if you don't want someone to do something harmful to you or annoying to you, then you shouldn't do it to anyone else. And in this case, it's got to do with judgment. And of course, the farmer simply uses the hawk's words to judge him with, and then gives him what he asked for, which is a neck wringing. Okay. Another good example of this fable in history, if any of you ever get a chance to read Shakespeare's play Henry V, or watch a film version of it, there's a scene where some of King Henry's, I'm not taking any questions right now, Nicholas, just calm down. There's a scene where King Henry catches some of his men planning to betray him. There's a war between England and France. King Henry finds out that some of his closest men were planning to hand him over to the French. And so King Henry plays a trick on his men. He gathers all of his close advisors and friends together, locks the door behind them, and then tells them a story about a certain man. Asher, you're going to get kicked out of here if you don't stop. Tells him a story about a certain man who was caught disrespecting the king, and then King Henry asks his friends what they think that the king should do to this man. And so these men who were planning to betray King Henry, who don't know that King Henry knows about it, they decide that they're going to try to show themselves faithful to King Henry. So they say, oh, you know, you should put that man to death. You should show them no mercy, right? We can't allow anyone to disrespect the king. And so King Henry just lets them talk about how the king should act with justice and how he should punish them. And then at the next moment, King Henry turns on them and says, well, then that's what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to judge you with the words of your own mouth. And so he sends them off to be put to death. So that's a good historical example of what we see here in this fable. Okay, the hawk and the farmer. So having said that, having gone through that fable, let me open up the chat. Any questions about this fable? Anything you'd like to say or ask about it while we're on here? No distracting nonsense, please. What's the moral? The moral is, I think the best way to put it is when Jesus teaches us not to judge, right? Do not judge others, because you're going to be judged with the same rule by which you judge. Okay, so be merciful so that you may receive mercy. All right, the hawk asked for mercy after he was planning to kill the pigeon. And the farmer basically gave him what he was going to give the pigeon. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Yeah, but Petra, you see how there's a context for that saying. It's that it's got to do with judgment, really. It's got to do with judging other people the way you want to be judged. So if you stand before God on Judgment Day, do you want God to be merciful and kind to you, or do you want God to be very strict with you? If you don't want God to be very strict, I know I certainly don't want God to be very strict with me. Therefore, when people do things bad to me, I have to think about that and say, how I react to this person is how God's going to react to me. So I need to be very careful. All right. Yeah, sometimes, Asher, you'll see that the fables, they're similar. Usually there's slight differences, but they can be pretty similar. Margaret, he was not following the golden rule. That's right. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Did Samuel do something like that to King David in the Bible? Did Samuel do something like that to King? Well, Samuel received nothing but good from David, if you know the story of King Samuel. David actually helped Samuel on a number of occasions. And then when wait a minute, you said Samuel. Did Samuel do something like that to David? I think I think you're thinking about the prophet Nathan. There's a prophet Nathan who comes to David and tells him a story, lets David judge based on the story. And then after David says that this man should be put to death and punished, Nathan says to David, you are the man, right? That's what you're thinking about, right? The story of Nathan and David. Yeah, pretty good story. So Nathan kind of traps David in his own judgment. Wringing the head. Anna asked about wringing the head. It just means, I don't want to be gross or anything, but it just means to twist the neck, to break the neck, and the bird dies. So it's a different way of killing a bird. Okay. It's a different way of killing a bird. So it's a way of killing the bird. We don't need to talk about killing birds. All right. Clear enough. Okay. So that's the fable of the hawk and the farmer. All right. That's the fable of the hawk and the farmer. Like wringing out a towel. Yeah, let's not get graphic, okay? We don't need to, get into the details of what it means. It just means to kill a bird, okay? So that's it for the hawk and the farmer, all right? Now we have to move on to the second fable. The second fable is a long one. That's why I wanted to kind of hurry through that first fable. So let's get to the second fable. I'll leave the chat open if you promise to be good. How about that? You guys promise to be good? I'll leave the chat open and ask you some questions if you promise to be good. Okay. All right, good. Thank you. All right, so the swallow and other birds. This is fable number 109. It's a long fable, so you're going to have to pay attention. See how long the fable is? All right, so let's go through this together here. The swallow and other birds. The swallow and other birds. So we know that a swallow is a certain kind of bird. We may not know much about the swallow, but we're going to learn a bit about the swallow in this fable. So we'll just pay attention as we read. So the swallow and other birds. Here's our second fable. This is fable number 109. A farmer sowing his fields with flax. Now you likely don't know what flax is, and that's okay because the fable is going to tell us what's important about flax. A farmer sowing his field with flax. That means he's planting flax seed in his field. A farmer sowing his fields with flax was observed by a swallow, who, like the rest of her tribe, like the other birds, like the other swallows, I should say. Yeah, we're going to get there. Just relax. We're going to read the fable. Just relax. Just relax. Relax. I said the fable is going to explain it for us. So just relax, okay? Farmer was sowing his field with flax. He was observed by a swallow who, like the other swallows, traveled a good deal and was very clever. So be careful to note that Aesop tells us what's important about a swallow. Swallows are a kind of bird that travel a great deal, so they fly great distances. They don't stay in one place. They travel a lot and they're very clever. That's what a swallow is, okay? Among other things, the swallow knew that of this same flax, when it grew up, nets and snares would be made to trap her little friends, the birds of the country. So that's what's important about flax. That's all we need to know. Flax is a plant that grows, and then when it's grown, it's used to spin and turn into a kind of string, and then nets and traps are made out of that flax. So the swallow knows that that the farmer is planting this flax to grow, and then it's going to be used to make nets. Okay, the swallow understands that. So the swallow earnestly besought them. What does the word besought mean? What does besought mean? What does besought mean? Based on what we read here, based on what we mean here. Based on what we read, what does besought mean? Begged, good, okay? So the swallow begged the other birds And what's important about these other birds, it says they're birds of the country. They're birds that stay in one place. They don't really travel like swallows do. So the swallow begged these country birds, these little birds in the country there where the farmer lived, she begged them to help her in picking up and eating the hateful seed before it had time to spring from the ground. All right, so she gathers all the birds together and she says, look, we need to go and we need to pull all of this seed out of the ground. We can't let it grow. It's dangerous. However, food of a much nicer kind was then so plentiful, so there was so much other food available that was much better than flaxseed, and it was so pleasant to fly about and sing. They just wanted to play, these other birds, thinking of nothing, that they paid no attention to her entreaties. So these country birds paid no attention to the swallow. She told them that they needed to go get this flaxseed and pull it all out of the ground. But they, there was so much other food available that they didn't want to eat this yucky flaxseed. It's not that good, not something that they would like to eat. And they would rather just goof around, fly about and sing, thinking of nothing. So they really didn't want to listen to what this swallow had to say. They weren't interested in the flax, and they would rather go and play. By and by. What does by and by mean? We've seen that in other fables. What does the phrase by and by mean? By and by. The time had passed. Very good. Later. Good. Okay, by and by. Later on, the blades of the flax, blades like the blades of grass, right? The blades of the flax appeared above the ground, so it started to grow, and the anxiety of the swallow was renewed. What does the word anxiety mean? What does anxiety mean? Scared for the future, good. What are some other words we could think of? Nervousness, good, nervous, that's right, good, okay. Worried, a fancy word, stress, that's good. Another word, solicitous. You want a fancy word, solicitous, okay. So by and by, as time passed, or later on, the blades of the flax appeared above the ground, and the anxiety of the swallow was renewed. Anna, I don't know what that means. You're going to have to work on spelling. Okay, so the swallow is getting more and more nervous because she's seeing this flax start to grow, and she says to the other birds, it's not yet too late. It's not yet too late. There's still time. Pull it all up, blade by blade. Pull it all up. Pull all it. It looks like grass at this time when it's growing. She's telling the birds, tear it all up. Pull all the blades of grass out. You may then escape the fate which is otherwise in store for you. So she's warning these birds. They already missed the chance to pull up the seeds. Now it's starting to grow. And she's saying, look, there's still time, but you've got to get this flax pulled out. Otherwise, bad things are coming for you. All right. Why can't she pull it up? Because it's probably a whole field full, and she can't pull it all up by herself. She's telling these birds, because there's a lot of them, she's telling them to all work together to pull it out. Okay. So she's warning them, there's still time, but you already missed one opportunity. Now this is your second opportunity. You better take advantage of it or you're going to be in trouble. And then she tells them why. So pay attention to these details. She says, you cannot fly to other countries like me. Pay attention to me. Stop chatting. Listen. You cannot fly to other countries like me when danger threatens you here. So if you want to know why didn't she pull it out, well, to be fair, the swallow's not in danger because the swallow can just go someplace else. Those other birds who were going to stay in that place, they were the ones who were in danger. And she's warning them. She says, you cannot, like me, fly to other countries when danger threatens you here. So she's warning them and warning them multiple times. The little birds, however, took no notice of the swallow, except to consider her a very troublesome person. What does troublesome mean? What does troublesome mean? The little birds considered the swallow to be troublesome, to make trouble, full of trouble. Let's think of words other than trouble. Overreacting is pretty good. Crazy is good. We'll actually see they call the swallow crazy later on. That's good, Michelle. Troublesome, just a pain, right? Just annoying. I think one of you wrote annoying, distracting, disturbing. Good. Okay, good. So we got the idea. So they thought the swallow was just being annoying, just bothering them, right? They wanted to play. There was lots of good stuff to eat. And here's this swallow, just, a killjoy is another word, just trying to bother everybody, complaining about trouble and all this stuff when they just, it's a beautiful day outside and everybody just wants to go play. All right. They call the swallow troublesome, don't pay attention to her, and say that her silly fears had set her beside herself. That's what it means to be crazy. She was sort of out of her mind, just crazy because she was filled with silly fears. Come on with all your silly fears. Leave us alone. But in the course of time, that's another phrase that means by and by, right? In the course of time, the flax grew and ripened and was gathered, was spun, that means it was turned into string, and then made into nets, as the swallow had foretold. What does foretold mean? What does that word foretold mean? Just hold your questions. We'll talk about it once we're done. Told before, very good. Someone said prophesied. Did I see prophesied? Joseph, that's good. Yeah, so to foretell is to speak something in advance, right? To tell the future, to foretell. So the farmer did exactly what the swallow warned the birds he was going to do. He grew that flax, harvested it, spun it, and started to turn it into, or to use it for net making. Now, as he began to put those nets to use, the birds were being trapped and dying. And it says, many a little bird thought in dying of the swallow they held to be so crazy. So as they were trapped in the nets, they remembered the warning that the swallow had given them. The swallow, in despair at their thoughtless behavior, has since preferred the society of men to that of her former companions. So the swallow tried to warn them, but they would not listen. And so as a result, the swallow finally just gave up on trying to help birds and went and spent her time with men instead. Okay? All right, so that's the fable of the swallow and the other birds. All right, the swallow and the other birds. So the story is pretty easy to understand, but this is a really, really great fable. There are so many good lessons that we can draw from this fable. So let's talk about this fable a little bit. Hang with me here. We've got a good amount of time, and I'd like to talk about this quite a bit because there's a lot in this fable. All right, so first of all, we have the swallow. Notice that the swallow is not in danger. So the swallow is strong. The swallow has the power to leave, go other places, do things. The swallow is not in danger. And yet the swallow lives in a place where other birds are in danger, right? Now, the swallow could just leave. The swallow could just say, I'm getting out of here. This is a dangerous place. I don't need to be here. I don't care about these other birds. I'm going to find myself a safe place. That's what the swallow could do, but the swallow doesn't do that. She chooses to go and try to help these birds by warning them about the danger. She's stronger than these other birds. She's, better at flying, obviously, than these other birds. She's also more clever than these other birds. She chooses to use all of her strengths, all of her virtues to help the other birds. She doesn't fly away. She doesn't just mock them or make fun of them and watch them from a distance. She chooses to use all of her strengths to go and help these other birds. Okay, so one good lesson we learned from this lesson, the swallow is a good example to us. If we have certain strengths, if we have certain virtues, certain abilities, certain talents, They're not just to use for ourselves, for our own benefit. We should think about how we can use them to help other people. Okay, so in that, the swallow is a good example of an unselfish person who seeks the common good, who seeks to help others. That's the first thing. All right. The birds, on the other hand, the birds are examples of fools, right? This is how foolish people live. The birds are foolish. They take no thought for the future. They don't think about what's going on around them. They don't think about their conditions. They don't pay attention to what others are doing. All they think about is seeking out, like it says here, food that tastes good and playing, right? That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to just play and fool around. They don't take life very seriously. So they're like foolish people. We could say they're like children because the Bible tells us that foolishness is bound up in the heart of children, okay? Children don't tend to think about the future. They usually think about, playing and having fun and goofing around. And what's always happening? Their parents or other adults are usually yelling at them to pay attention and be careful and so on. And the children are like these little birds. They don't listen. They think that the swallow is just being annoying, like, go away, you troublesome sparrow, leave us alone. We just want to play and have a nice time. You're always complaining, you're always fussing about stuff. Go away, leave us alone. So these little birds, we could say they're like children. We could say a swallow is like a wise older teacher or parent or someone in the life of these little children. They don't think about the future. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand. And that's what traps are for, right? The whole idea of a trap is that a person who is smart can catch a person who's or a thing that's not smart, all right? That's the whole idea of a trap. So we can think about the character of those little birds and how they're foolish and they're not thoughtful. There's a good word to learn here. A good word to learn here that I'm going to type real quick is circumspect. Circumspect. That word circumspect means to always be looking around, right? Always keep an eye on what's going on around you, to be circumspect. All right. The word circum means like a circle around, and spect means to be watching, to watch. So circumspect is a word that means always paying attention, always looking around, keeping an eye on what's going around you. A foolish person doesn't think, right? That's why they run right into a trap. Think about a mouse trap. Mouse trap is about the dumbest thing ever, right? You put the trap, the death machine, right in front of the mouse. The mouse can see it, but what does the mouse do? The mouse is not circumspect. What is the mouse thinking about? What's the mouse thinking about? Just the cheese, right? And is so foolish and lacks any circumspection that the mouse will walk right onto the trap, literally climb onto the trap and put itself right into the trap, thinking only about the cheese, not thinking, hey, what's this bizarre machine here in the middle of the floor, right? I mean, it's pretty dumb, but that's how mice are. They're a symbol of that lack of circumspect living, like these birds, all right? So being circumspect means to pay attention to what's going on around you and think before you take something, before you seek something, all right? So the birds are an example of foolish creatures. And then eventually, exactly what the swallow said was going to happen happens. The birds all get caught. They're all going to be put to death or die stuck in the nets, right? And that's it. And they all suffer the consequences of their life, and they have to live in regret. They have to live in regret, realizing that the swallow warned them and told them about this, and they didn't listen, and now they have no excuse. That's one of the scary things about thinking about hell, right? What's scary about hell, it's not just scary to think about people being punished. That's one thing, but the people who are being punished, there are going to be living souls. They're going to remember things. They're going to know things. They're going to be able to think back and remember all the times they were warned to prepare for Judgment Day and they didn't listen because they thought all those people were troublesome and crazy and so on. And they're going to have to live with that regret forever and ever and ever. That's actually the thought when I was 18 years old when I became a Christian. And that was the thought that actually made me become a Christian. I thought of how scary it would be. There was one verse in the Bible where Jesus says, he's talking about Judgment Day, and he says, the king says, "Depart from me, you wicked, into the, into hell." And I remember thinking about that and how scary that would be, that it would never, ever be possible to change that. And that's what led to me actually choosing to become a Christian. But to think about that regret, to know that someone tried to help you, someone tried to warn you, and you didn't listen, and now you're trapped and it's too late. So you've got that example in the little birds. And then lastly, notice the end result for the swallow. The end result for the swallow is that the swallow is in despair. What does despair mean? What does that mean? The swallow is in despair at the end. Sadness, hopelessness, good, right? Suffering, no hope, sadness, very good. So the swallow at the end of the story is in despair. Now think about it. Think about this. The swallow in the beginning, we learned, was more clever than all the other birds, is strong, is safe, has all of these good things, right? Is better than the other birds. The swallow is blessed in a number of different ways. The swallow is also good, right? The swallow tries to help other people, as it were, other birds. But look at how the swallow ends up. The swallow ends up in despair. It's kind of strange to read that, right? You would think the swallow was happy because, she's so blessed and safe and good, but that's not true. The swallow is in despair. And there's a proverb, or actually, I think it's in the book of Ecclesiastes. It says, with much knowledge, I'm going to type this so you can see it, comes much grief. With much knowledge comes much grief. One of the things that's difficult in life for wise men is that they have to watch people suffer who they tried to help, who wouldn't listen. And, they have to live with this experience of seeing people continuously suffer things they could have escaped from. Okay, so the swallow ends up in sadness because she knew what the danger was, and she just watched these foolish birds fly right into the trap, miss the opportunities that they had to save themselves and end up getting caught in the trap. Okay. So she, in despair, being in sorrow and hopelessness, just gives up on helping birds. She gets to a point where she says, there's just no point. There's no way to help them. And so it says that instead she chose to spend her time with men and stay away from birds. So that's the end of the story of it. Now we can just go on and on and on with these moral lessons. For example, not only did the birds hurt themselves, but the birds also hurt other birds, because now the swallow's leaving. She's saying, I'm not going to stay around these dumb birds. I'm getting out of here. So the swallow tried to help the birds. They wouldn't listen. They ended up getting themselves killed by not listening. And they moved the swallow to leave and go someplace else. So the other birds now are in even more trouble because they don't even have warnings. All right. So not only did their behavior affect them, but it affected other birds. A good lesson, a good application that I'd like to recommend for you with this fable is it has a lot to do with schooling. And let me explain. It has a lot to do with schooling. So hear me out. Let's pretend I'm like the old swallow and you guys are like the little birds. All right. The swallow is telling the little birds that they're in for trouble in the future, and they've got an opportunity to save themselves from their trouble. Okay. There's trouble ahead, or possible trouble ahead, that the little birds don't really understand. And the swallow is saying, you've got an opportunity to save yourself from this trouble. And so there's the first time the swallow warns the birds, right? The swallow says, look, the farmer has planted the seed. Go and pull this seed out so it doesn't grow. It's your first chance, your first opportunity to save yourselves. Go pull out all the seed. And the birds choose not to listen. And then the swallow comes again and says, there's still time. You have a second chance. Pull out all the blades of the flax grass that's growing. Pull it all out. There's still time. You have a second chance. And they choose to ignore that as well. I'd like to recommend a little illustration here. It's very much like your schooling, right? It's very much like your schooling. When you're young, you have the opportunity to study at home or in a school while you're just a kid, and you've got parents who are encouraging you to study. I'm sure that your priests and other people at church are encouraging you to study. Grandma, uncles, and aunts might be encouraging you to study. Maybe even some of your older siblings, if they've learned some lessons in life, they're encouraging you to study. And you're like these little birds. You're like, oh, come on, come on with all these warnings about that. There'll be plenty of time for that in the future. I want to play. I just want to, run around in circles and make myself dizzy and fall down in the middle of the living room. That's what I'd like to do today. That's the kind of stuff, I know what it's like as a kid. You just want to go explore, go climb trees, crawl under the house, whatever. You want to just goof around and play. And you're being told by older people, no, you really need to pull all these seeds out of the ground. It's an important time. You need to save yourself from trouble. And all the little birds are like, get out of here, you troublesome old people, right? Like the swallow. So time goes by and you go through your school years, and often students miss the opportunity to help themselves. And so sometimes they go to college, and in college, you sort of get a second chance, right? You get a second chance because even if you messed up the first time, even if you messed up during your school years, when you go to college, you have a chance to start over again. And if you work really hard during college, you can end up catching up to other people, or even, advancing beyond other people by using those years. So you have a second chance to save your education. Follow me here. We can talk about questions when I'm done. I'll leave some time. So college for many people is like a second chance to save your life from trouble that's coming. Sometimes people mess up in school, go into adult life. They're kind of stuck with some bad options because they didn't study well, and they use second opportunities to get things fixed up and ready. But you eventually get to a point sometimes where you're in trouble. And the scariest thing about that trouble is not even that you're going to be in trouble, but you're going to have to live with this constant reminder of all of the people who warned you all along the way. And that's going to be one of the most difficult things to bear with, right? I'm not saying you're going to be homeless, right? We're not saying you're going to be, it's not total hopelessness, but it's missed opportunities, right? Missed opportunities that are going to leave you not dead, right? If you don't do well in school, you don't all die suddenly, right? So it's not that bad. I'm not saying if you don't study, you're going to get trapped in a net and die in a field somewhere. We're just using it as an illustration, but you're going to have difficulties in life and have to live with regret of thinking back to opportunities that you had and you didn't take advantage of. That's really, I think, the scary thing, is living with regrets. So having no regrets is one of the main things that should direct your daily behavior. You should say to yourself, I want to live a life so that when I'm 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, I have no regrets. I don't look back and wish I did something different. I want to live with no regrets. All right. I would say that that's a good application of this moral. It shows you how you have opportunities in life, and you're going to live in sadness with regrets if you don't take advantage of those opportunities. Okay. So I think that's a good use for you students, of the fable of the swallow and the other birds. The swallow represents any wise person. Any wise person saying to the little ones, as it were, make use of the opportunities you have. The saying, seize the day, right? Make good use of these resources you have. Your parents make things available to you. Make use of those things. That you're surrounded with good people. Make use of those people in a good way, not in a selfish way. But if there's somebody in your life that is very smart or is very wise, there's another proverb. I'll write it here. Let me write it real quick. Another proverb, he who walks with the wise becomes wise. If there are good people in your life, those are the people you should try to be with. If there's someone in your life who's good at something, go ask them to show you how to do it. If they're smart, ask them to explain things to you. Make good use of people in your life. And when I say use other people, I don't mean it selfishly. I mean, make good use of them because they have knowledge and skills, and they'll probably be happy to share it with you. Okay. Obviously, your parents are the first educators, right? The church teaches us parents are the first educators, but your parents aren't the only people you have in your life. There's lots of people in your life, if you think about it, who could help you if you made good use of them. But often, because you don't want to hear their talk about the future and what you should, you stay away from them because like these little birds, you think they're just troublesome and they're miserable. They're always talking about other stuff and I just want to have fun. So you have to be careful. Make good use of the people and resources you have and live a life with no regrets. Okay? So that's the fable of the swallow and the other birds. The moral of the story, there's a bunch of morals, as I always tell you, and we can keep thinking about them and coming up with even more and more moral lessons. But I think the most important one, if we think about the little birds, it's to listen to the advice of wiser people. In this situation, it's a bird who's better than you, a bird who's wiser and stronger and better than you, telling you what to do. You should listen to that advice and take advantage of opportunities that you have when you have them, because you might not have them in the future. Okay. I think that's a good moral lesson to take away from this fable. But as I said, you can keep thinking about this and come up with more and more lessons because there's a lot of information in this fable and it's very rich. All right. Okay, so having said that, any questions about this fable or the other fable? Any questions about anything I talked about or anything we read about in the fable? Anything you're curious about? Anything that you thought of that I didn't mention that you'd like to share? Feel free to let us know here. Can you just do it with Joe for the rest of the class? I don't know what that means, Anna. No questions, no questions. All right, so remember, this live class is not intended to replace online lessons. So take some time, hopefully today or soon, and go and get lessons 108 and 109 done, because you've got the fables in your head. We've talked about them and explained them. So go and get those assignments done while it's all still clear. How does flax ripen? It's like wheat. Give me 1 second. Maybe if you don't live in the country, it's hard to understand these things. Let me see if I can get a picture for you real quick. I'll get a picture of wheat. It's like wheat. It's a kind of grass, which is really what wheat is. I'm just going to see if I can get a good picture. 1 second. I'll get you a picture of it here. So I'll share my screen again. Just a second. Okay, so up on the screen, you can see flax. It grows like a tall grass, but it's just a long, thin grass, but it's very, very strong. And so if you harvest it, you can actually spin it, which means like to twist it together and turn it into long strands of string that's very, very strong. And then they can use that to make nets and things with. Okay, so it's really just a kind of grass that's so strong and it grows very tall that if you cut it and harvest it and then spin it like wool, you can spin it into string and make things out of it. Okay, so really it's just a kind of grass. And you see that there's these buds on the top. That's not the important part. It's just the long stems of the flax that's used to make string with and net. Realize that if you're out in the country, like farmers, today is a little different, but especially in Aesop's time, people who lived in the country, they didn't have hardware stores and things like that. There was nowhere you could go to buy stuff. They had to find ways to make things, and they could make their own rope. They could make their own nets and things like that using plants that they grew. So they'd have to grow things, not to eat, but to actually use for all different products and things like that. Okay, so that's what flax is. Hope that's clearer now. All right, Petra, thank you for coming. I hope that was helpful. Margaret asked, how do little birds get trapped in the nets if the nets are on the ground? No, the nets are set for the birds. The nets are set for the birds. Sometimes, for example, if you grow fruits like berries, the birds will eat all the berries. So farmers wrap the plants or wrap the bushes, sometimes even trees. They'll wrap them with nets to keep the birds out of them, and the birds will just get stuck in them. Okay, I don't think the farmers are trying to catch the birds. Like, they're not going to eat little birds. It's usually the nets are used to keep the birds out of the fruit bushes and fruit trees, and the birds can get caught in those nets and die stuck in them. So that's what's dangerous about them. We will not have class next week, but the week after Thanksgiving, we'll get back to class. Okay, the week after Thanksgiving. Jackson asked, what does it mean when it says that the swallow went with to live with men instead of birds? I'm not really sure about that one, Jackson. I think it certainly means that he or she just gave up trying to save other birds, right? Basically saying, like, look, I don't need to be here. I don't need to deal with these troubles. I'm just going to let these dumb birds do their own thing. I don't have time for this. And so the swallow chose to leave and not spend time with other birds, probably because the swallow felt like he had more in common with men than with dumb birds who don't listen. All right. Okay, good questions. Good questions. Yeah, just to make it clear, no class next week. Thanksgiving week, no classes. After Thanksgiving week, we'll start up again. All right, let me just scroll back through here, make sure I didn't miss any questions. Is it the same type of flax that we eat? You probably eat the seeds. I doubt you eat the stems of the flax, right? So you're probably talking about the seeds of flax. I mean, it's pretty funny. All wheat, if you think about wheat and wheat bread, wheat is just the seeds of the wheat plant. Wheat is just grass. We eat the seeds of the wheat grass. We grind them up when they're dry and we use them to make bread, but that's just seeds. Flax is the same way. I don't eat flax, so I don't know. If we use the moral you give us, do we cite you or you just put it in quotations? No, you can just say, in our live class, we discussed the moral of this fable is blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. Okay. See any other questions that I missed? John Sisman asked earlier, how do you crawl under a house? That might sound weird if you live up in the north. Down in the south here, we can't have basements under our house because the water level under the ground is very high. And if you dug a basement, it would fill up with water. So we actually build our houses above the ground, and there's usually a space under the house that's called a crawl space. And all your pipes and stuff is actually under the house. Water pipes, electric pipes, those things are under the house. There's usually a door on the bottom of the house, and you can crawl under there and work on things. So it's a type of house in certain places. Sorry if that was confusing. If you live up north, there's no crawl spaces up north. You have basements. Okay. Yeah, we have a crawl space in our house. You can't have a basement where we live. The water level is too high. It's called the water table under the ground. Can't the swallows just avoid the trap? The swallows can, but the The other birds were not swallows. They weren't paying attention and they got trapped. Okay. Good questions. Good questions. Is Mrs. Michael going to do a WC class, World Chronology, I guess? Mrs. Michael's classes are listed on the live class page. I'm going to make the links for the registration as soon as we're done here today. I know she's doing a religion class, an English class. What else? A humanities class and a math class. So World Chronology might be in the humanities class she does. That's for kids ages 6 to 12, though. It's going to be, she's an elementary teacher. She's going to work with younger kids. Underneath the houses, you basically have a swimming pool. No, it doesn't fill up with water. The water is under the ground, but if you had to dig deep enough to put a basement in, you would be into the water level and water would be flowing into your basement. It's dry under the house, but like, for example, if I go out on the farm and dig a hole for a fence, like a 3-foot deep hole, it'll start filling up with water. The water level is just a few feet down where we live. I'm not talking about well water. Like, we have a well, it's 200 feet deep. But Mr. Michael, my dad, Michael Harden, wanted to tell me that he said hi. Tell him I said hi. I remember him very well. We talk about Mr. Harden all the time when we think about our trip to Jamaica. Thank you. Tell him I say hello. I hope everybody's doing well. I remember everybody. Very good. Are we still having reasoning, writing, and rhetoric next month? I saw on the calendar that the academy is going to be closed. After Thanksgiving, we'll have, I think, 3 weeks. December 15th, the fall term ends and we take Christmas break. I would love to have meetings all the time, but I have to take a break too because I have other work to do. Like, some of you students will be on with me for live classes and then you'll be yelling at me, well, why are you grading my assignments? Well, there's just not a lot of time for everything. And I've got to publish new lessons, get everything graded. I've got my own studies to finish up. So I need Christmas break to get other work done so that during the terms, we can do things like this, okay? So those break times are necessary. We wouldn't have any lessons on the website if it wasn't for break times, okay? My wife's, Mrs. Michael's humanities class, I think that's on Fridays. If you go to classicalliberalarts.com/live, you'll see that information and you'll be able to sign up later today when I get those links done. What is the moral of the swallow and the other birds? It's to listen to those who are wiser than you and take advantage of opportunities that you have, right? Don't ignore opportunities you have to do good things. They may not be around in the future. You might, for example, you might not be healthy. You might not be strong. People that you think will be available might die and you'll be stuck in a time when you need help and it's not available. You have to make sure you seize the day. That's a popular phrase. Okay. Yeah, Zoriana, you asked about Joshua and Samuel. My older sons are helping me with grading. They're going to continue, and other students are also going to begin helping with grading. So you'll see other students grading some of your assignments. Usually it's just going to be 100 level, maybe some 200 level classes, but all the higher level stuff I'll be grading. So Aesop's Fables, things like that. Okay. And if you ever get a grade from anybody else that you think is a stinky grade, you don't like it, right? Thank you, Liana or Liana. Thank you for coming. If you ever get a grade that you don't think is right, and I don't mean that they gave you a low grade because your work stinks and you're upset about it. I mean, you think something's not right. Just let me know, okay? Just let me know. It's okay. But what's good about having other people grade your work is usually if there's anything bad, they'll let me know. Thank you guys for coming. I'm just going to keep talking here, but I see you saying goodbye. Thank you for coming. If there's any grade you think is wrong, just let me know. But the good thing about it is they're going to allow your assignments to get returned to you much quicker. If you have to wait for me, sometimes you'll be waiting a long time, and it's just a simple assignment that there's no reason to wait for. They'll get your assignments back to you much quicker. And those of you who are studying, if you do good work, you have the opportunity also to help with grading, and I'll pay you for it. So it's a way to make some money. If you're a good student, you can help me with grading and get paid for grading. Okay. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Gabriel. All right. Thank you, Cullen family. Thanks for coming. All right, I'm going to turn off my recording here. Stop sharing my screen, turn off the recording, and then we're just private now.